My brother stole money I saved for years while I supported him, so I took legal action and left him with nothing he ever expected. I'm a 28-year-old guy who has always played the role of the responsible older brother, the one who stepped up every single time my younger sibling needed saving. From the time we were kids, I was the shield, the planner, the quiet fixer, and I wore that identity like armor even when it started cutting into my own skin. I worked brutal mechanical shifts, greasy late nights, weekend side hustles, and soul-draining overtime just to build a safety fund I swore I'd never touch. In my mind, that money wasn't just savings, it was proof that I could protect us, proof that I was doing something right. My brother leaned on me constantly, not just for cash but for emotional rescue, job connections, excuses to our parents, and reassurance when his life spiraled again. "You know I'm trying, man. I just need a little help this time," he'd say, voice soft with practiced desperation. I'd hand over another envelope, another transfer, another promise to myself that this was the last time. Inside, I felt a strange mix of pride and fatigue, like love and obligation had tangled into something I couldn't separate anymore. Our bond felt unbreakable, forged through years of shared struggle, whispered late-night talks, and my constant role as his safety net. I told myself this was what real family looked like, loyalty no matter the cost, sacrifice without keeping score. The workshop's oil-soaked air clung to my clothes, the smell following me home as I collapsed onto my bed, too tired to even complain. Still, when his name flashed on my phone again, I answered without hesitation. And as his voice trembled on the other end asking for one more favor, a quiet unease settled in my chest that I couldn't explain yet somehow. I started noticing small shifts in the way my brother spoke to me, tiny edges of impatience that cut deeper than I wanted to admit. He no longer asked with gratitude, he expected, like my bank account and my time were automatic extensions of his life. "Why do you always act like it's such a big deal?" he snapped once, when I hesitated before sending him another transfer. I laughed it off, pretending it didn't sting, but something inside me folded quietly. The pride I once felt began mixing with confusion and a creeping sense of being taken for granted. He began mocking my careful budgeting, calling me paranoid for caring about numbers and long-term plans. "You worry too much, bro, money comes and goes," he scoffed, sipping his drink like he had life figured out. I watched him show up in new shoes, expensive cologne, and nights that always ended somewhere I wasn't invited. The contrast between his carefree spending and my exhausted discipline felt sharp, but I swallowed the discomfort. I told myself this was just a phase, that my patience would guide him back eventually. The garage lights flickered above me one night as I stayed late fixing a stubborn engine, sweat dripping down my neck and into my eyes. My phone buzzed again, his name glowing against the cracked screen. "I just need a little more, man, I swear I'll pay you back this time," he said with casual confidence. I stared at the tool in my hand, feeling a strange heaviness settle in my chest. Even my parents brushed off my concerns, waving me silent when I mentioned his behavior. "He's your brother, stop acting distant," my mother murmured, eyes full of expectation. And as I stood there, torn between duty and doubt, a quiet realization began forming that something about our dynamic was starting to rot. I'm not sure when it shifted from love to obligation, but I remember the first time I felt nervous instead of protective when my brother called. We were at a family dinner, the kind where everyone pretends things are normal, and he started joking about finally upgrading his lifestyle while nudging me with a crooked grin. "Good thing I've got reliable people, right?" he laughed, loud enough for everyone to hear. My parents chuckled like it was harmless humor, but my stomach tightened like a warning bell I didn't want to acknowledge. Later that night, he cornered me outside, the cold air biting at my face as he casually asked, "So how much do you actually have saved now?" His tone wasn't curious, it was calculated, and I felt exposed in a way I couldn't explain. "Why does it matter?" I asked, trying to keep my voice steady. He shrugged, flashing that familiar smile. "Just making sure my big brother's still on top of things." Inside, guilt and unease twisted together, forming a knot that refused to loosen. I replayed his words on the drive home, the way his eyes lingered too long, the way his confidence felt rehearsed. The scent of rain on asphalt filled my car as I sat there in silence, engine off, hands resting uselessly on the steering wheel. I told myself I was overthinking, that paranoia was easier than facing the truth. Still, the next few days, he started getting pushier, demanding faster responses, larger amounts, more access. "Why do you have to make it complicated?" he snapped over the phone when I hesitated. You're supposed to have my back, not question me. His words cut deeper than I expected, and I felt that familiar weight of being the bad one for wanting clarity. When I quietly mentioned my concerns to my parents, my father sighed disappointedly. You've always been too rigid, he muttered. He just needs support. I nodded, swallowing my frustration, but something inside me cracked further. Because as I left their house that night, a chilling thought crept in that I wasn't his brother anymore. I was his resource. And he was starting to look at me like he'd already decided what to take. I found out on a Tuesday night, when I opened my banking app out of pure habit and felt my breath vanish. The number on the screen looked wrong, like my eyes were lying to me. My stomach dropped as I refreshed it once, then twice, then again. A massive chunk of my savings, years of sweat, overtime, and silent sacrifice, was just gone. I sat there frozen on the edge of my bed, the glow of my phone painting my hands pale and shaking. My heart pounded so hard it felt like it was trying to claw its way out of my chest. When I checked the transaction history, my vision blurred as familiar details stared back at me. The device, the location, the login trail all pointed to one impossible truth. I already knew who it was before I whispered his name out loud. I called him, hands trembling, and when he answered, his voice sounded almost bored. What did you do? I asked, barely recognizing the broken tone in my own voice. There was a pause, a slow exhale, then a soft laugh that made my blood run cold. Relax, man. I needed it more than you right now, he said, like that justified everything. The world tilted as rage, disbelief, and grief tangled inside me all at once. I could barely breathe, barely speak, barely understand how my own brother could sound so calm. You can't just take it, I whispered, voice cracking with desperation and disbelief. He sighed like I was the problem, like my pain was an inconvenience to his comfort. In that moment, staring at the blank wall of my room, I felt something inside me fracture forever. And as the call ended in cold silence, I realized this wasn't a mistake or desperation, it was only the beginning of a betrayal I'd never imagined my own blood capable of. The aftermath didn't feel like justice or even chaos, it felt like emotional whiplash that never stopped spinning. When I confronted him in person, he didn't look ashamed, he looked annoyed, like I had interrupted his day over something trivial. You're acting like I killed someone, he scoffed, leaning back in his chair with careless ease. You'll earn more. You always do. His words hit harder than the theft itself, because in that moment, he truly believed he had every right to what I built. I drove straight to my parents' house, heart racing, hands sweating against the steering wheel, desperate for someone to stand with me. My mother listened with furrowed brows, but her voice softened the second my brother walked in. Why are you making such a scene? She asked, disappointment dripping from every syllable. He's struggling, and you're his brother. My father nodded silently, as if the betrayal was something minor, easily brushed aside. He stole everything I saved, I pleaded, my voice breaking, chest tightening under the weight of disbelief. My brother rolled his eyes. He's exaggerating like always, he muttered. He just doesn't want to help me when I actually need it. And just like that, the story twisted, the villain quietly assigned to me instead. What hurt most wasn't the money anymore, it was watching my own family accept his lies without hesitation. The familiar living room suddenly felt colder, the air heavier, their faces distant like strangers. I saw him scroll through his phone, laughing at something, wearing shoes I knew my savings paid for. A deep humiliation settled in my bones as I realized he wasn't hiding it, he was flaunting it. Posting dinners, nights out, luxury purchases, all while my stomach churned with quiet rage and heartbreak. When I finally turned to leave, my mother's voice followed me. Don't destroy this family over money, she said softly. But as I stepped outside into the cool night air, trembling and alone, I felt a terrifying truth creeping in. This wasn't just betrayal anymore, this was war disguised as blood. And I still hadn't decided how far I was willing to go when he called me again with a voice full of careless confidence. I thought I'd already hit the worst emotional point, but I was wrong, because the truth I uncovered was far uglier than simple theft. A week later, I ran into one of his old friends outside a convenience store, and the way his expression shifted when he saw me told me everything before he even spoke. Man, you don't know what he's been saying about you, he muttered, eyes avoiding mine. My stomach nodded as he explained how my brother had been bragging about playing me and using my money as a backup supply, like I was just another resource he could tap into whenever he wanted. The air felt thick and suffocating as realization settled in. This wasn't desperation, or panic, or rock-bottom survival. It was calculated. He hadn't stolen my money because he was drowning, he stole it because he knew I wouldn't stop him. That night, I drove past the bar he frequented and saw his car parked out front, bass thumping faintly through the walls. I could see the glow of neon reflected in the puddles on the pavement, laughter spilling out as the door swung open. Inside, there he was, surrounded by people, confident, careless, alive with the life my savings had paid for. My chest tightened like a slow vice. When I confronted him later, his mask slipped just enough for the truth to leak through. "You've always been too soft," he said with a faint smirk. "You make money, I survive. That's just how it works." My hands trembled, but not with fear anymore. Something colder settled in me, something quiet and sharp. I realized then that our bond, the brotherhood I'd protected so fiercely, only existed in my head. To him, I was never family, I was a system. A tool. A walking safety net. As I sat alone in my car after that conversation, the engine humming beneath me, an eerie calm replaced the chaos. And beneath that calm, a dangerous thought began to form, because for the first time, I wasn't thinking about forgiveness or repair. I was thinking about consequences, and how far I was willing to go to finally stop being his victim. I didn't recognize myself anymore, not in the mirror, not in my own thoughts, not even in the silence that followed me everywhere. The house felt hollow, like every wall echoed the weight of what I'd lost, not just money but the illusion of family I'd clung to for years. Nights blurred into restless hours, my mind looping between disbelief and shame, as if I had somehow failed by trusting too deeply. My phone stayed face down on the table, yet I felt its presence like a quiet threat, knowing it could carry another message full of blame. Friends drifted when they sensed the tension, and relatives avoided mentioning his name like the truth itself was toxic. "You're being too dramatic," one cousin whispered, eyes flickering away like my pain was embarrassing to witness. Even familiar places started feeling hostile, as if the world was siding with him just to remind me how replaceable I truly was. A heaviness settled in my chest that no amount of sleep or distraction could touch. I replayed our childhood memories, the nights I defended him, the excuses I made, the sacrifices I swallowed, and every flashback felt like a cruel joke. My mind kept whispering questions I didn't want answers to. Was I ever enough? Was I only useful when I gave? The emotional exhaustion carved deep grooves into my thoughts until self-doubt felt permanent. One night, sitting on my couch with the room dim and cold, my phone lit up unexpectedly. His name stared back at me, bold and unapologetic. I let it ring, but the unease crept up my spine all the same. A second later, a message appeared: "Relax. You'll get over it. You always do." My hands trembled as I read it, not from fear, but from a deep, hollow anger I could barely control. The weight of humiliation pressed down harder, suffocating the last traces of the brother I once knew. And as the notification faded off my screen, I realized something terrifying was happening inside me. The numbness was starting to feel powerful, and I wasn't sure what that meant yet. It happened on a storm-heavy evening when the kind of rain that feels like it's punishing the ground matched perfectly with the way my chest felt. I opened my mailbox and found the notice taped inside, the sharp edges of the paper slicing warm panic through my veins before I even finished reading. Final warning. Overdue payments. Reduced account balance. Eviction risk. I stood there, soaked and motionless, rain dripping down my face like it was trying to wash away the humiliation that clung to me instead. I went inside and collapsed onto the floor, back pressed against the door I barely managed to close. The air felt heavy, stale, like it had absorbed every breath of defeat I'd exhaled over the past weeks. I stared at the ceiling, listening to the faint creak of the building settling around me, and wondered how I'd fallen this far just for trying to love my own family. My phone buzzed again, and before I even looked, I somehow knew it wasn't kindness arriving. "You good?" my brother texted, the casual tone almost mocking. "Just checking in." A bitter laugh escaped my throat, half sob, half disbelief, because he knew exactly where I stood financially. He knew his theft had put me here, and still, he pretended concern like a joke I wasn't part of. I called him without thinking, voice cracking the second he answered. "You ruined me," I whispered, barely able to keep the words together. There was silence, then a dismissive sigh. "You're being dramatic again. Figure it out like you always do." And just like that, the call ended, leaving cold nothing in its place. I slid down further until my forehead pressed against my knees, body shaking, vision blurred with tears I didn't remember inviting. It wasn't just the money. It was the realization that no one was coming to save me. Not my family. Not my brother. Not the version of me who used to believe in loyalty. As I sat there in the quiet aftermath of everything I once built, a dangerous stillness crept over me. And in that silence, a thought began whispering louder than the storm outside, a thought that felt a little less like pain, and a little more like purpose. I didn't wake up one morning brave or empowered, I just woke up tired of feeling like prey. The storm from the night before had passed, leaving a heavy stillness behind, and for the first time in weeks, my mind wasn't spinning in circles. It felt focused, sharp, almost eerily calm. I looked around my small apartment, the peeling paint, the unpaid bills stacked on the counter, the silence that once felt suffocating, and something inside me hardened. I stopped crying. I stopped scrolling through old memories. I stopped waiting for an apology that would never come. Instead, I opened my laptop and began pulling every record I could find. Bank statements. Transaction histories. Call logs. Screenshots of his messages. I created folders, labeled dates, organized timelines, each click of the keyboard steady and deliberate. The quiet hum of the fan felt like the only witness to my transformation. My phone rang again, his name flashing across the screen, but this time I didn't feel fear or sadness. I let it ring, watching it fade into silence like his voice no longer held power over me. A strange control washed over my chest as I ignored him, as if reclaiming even that small choice gave me a piece of myself back. Later that day, I sat across from a financial consultant, hands folded tightly in my lap, while I explained everything in trembling but controlled detail. He frowned, eyes narrowing as he flipped through my printed evidence. "This isn't just family drama," he muttered. "This is serious financial misconduct." Hearing those words out loud lit something inside me that felt both terrifying and validating. For the first time, someone looked at the situation and didn't call me dramatic. They didn't tell me to forgive. They didn't tell me to stay quiet for the sake of peace. They called it what it was. As I walked back out into the open air, the sky clear and bright in a way I hadn't noticed for weeks, my phone buzzed with another message from him. "So you gonna calm down now or what?" he wrote casually. I stared at the screen, heart steady, lips pressed thin. And in that moment, I knew he still had no idea what I'd started setting in motion, and how unprepared he was for what would come next. The day I walked into the lawyer's office, my hands were steady, but my heart was louder than ever. The sharp scent of polished wood and fresh paper filled the air, and every step across the tiled floor felt like crossing a line I could never uncross. I laid out everything in front of him, bank records, screenshots, timelines, every piece of proof that told the story my family refused to hear. He listened in silence, flipping through each page with slow precision, then finally looked up at me with a seriousness that made my stomach tighten. "This is theft," he said calmly. "And it's actionable." Hearing it spoken so clearly felt surreal, like the truth was finally stepping out of the shadows. I signed my name with a pen that trembled just slightly, aware that this wasn't just paperwork. It was a declaration that I was no longer protecting the person who destroyed me. As I left the building, the city noise felt sharper, every car horn and distant shout echoing against my chest, but instead of panic, a strange clarity followed me. 2 days later, he called again, more persistent than usual. I watched the screen light up over and over, letting it buzz on the table while I sat on the edge of my bed. Finally, I answered, letting silence stretch the moment. "You really ignoring me now?" he scoffed, irritation slipping through his casual tone. "What, you mad forever?" "I'm just busy," I replied flatly, my voice calm enough to make my own skin prickle. There was a brief pause, then a forced chuckle. "Don't tell me you're still crying over that money," he said. "You always cool off eventually." If only he knew what was already moving beyond his reach. Later that afternoon, my lawyer called with an update, his voice precise and composed. "We're filing the formal complaint today," he said. "He'll be served soon." The words sat heavy in the air, wrapping around me like a countdown. As night approached, my brother's confidence still filled my messages, unaware, careless, taunting. And while he laughed somewhere, living comfortably off what he stole, I sat in the quiet of my apartment knowing something irreversible was coming for him, and it was already on its way. It started with a knock at his door, sharp and official, the kind you can't laugh off or ignore. I wasn't there, but I heard the story from a cousin who happened to witness it, how his confident smirk slowly drained as the papers were read aloud. "You've been formally served," the officer said, voice firm and unyielding. My brother tried to play it cool, joking, shrugging, acting like it was some misunderstanding that would magically vanish. But for once, no one was laughing with him. The calls came fast after that. "What the hell did you do?" he snapped over the phone, anger cracking through what used to be arrogance. "You really trying to ruin my life over money?" I didn't answer right away. I let the silence sit between us, heavy and unfamiliar, the kind that finally made him uncomfortable. "You ruined your own life," I said quietly, each word slow and measured, and ended the call before he could twist it again. My parents called next, panic bleeding into their voices. "This has gone too far," my mother pleaded. "He's family." But now, their words no longer controlled the narrative inside my head. For the first time, I heard them as echoes of the same favoritism that enabled everything that hurt me. As the days passed, the reality started gripping him. His accounts were frozen. His credit lines questioned. The people who once hovered around his careless lifestyle vanished one by one. The same hands that clapped his ego now turned away in silent judgment. And I watched from a distance, not with joy, but with a calm I never thought I'd feel. He showed up at my door late one night, eyes tired, voice strained, something fragile flickering where confidence once lived. "We can fix this," he murmured, softer than I'd ever heard him. "Just drop it. Please." I stood there, heart steady, remembering every night I begged him to stop, every time he mocked my pain, every time my loyalty was weaponized. The cold night air brushed against my skin as I studied the brother who no longer looked like a king, but not yet like someone who truly understood what he'd done. And as he searched my face for mercy, a quiet question hung between us, whether justice would be the only language he would finally respect. "You said." The courtroom felt colder than I imagined, air sharp and sterile, every footstep echoing like punctuation to a story that had dragged on too long. I sat there while the judge methodically broke down every transaction, every unauthorized withdrawal, every lie that once hid behind the word family. My brother stood across the room, shoulders slumped, eyes avoiding mine as if shame had finally found him. When the ruling came, it was calm, factual, inevitable. Restitution ordered. Assets seized. Consequences enforced. He turned to me in desperation as they escorted him forward. "You didn't have to go this far," he whispered, voice cracked and hollow. I felt the weight of every sleepless night, every broken promise, every apology that never came. "You went that far," I replied quietly. "I just stopped pretending it was okay." The words felt steady, exact, like I was finally speaking for the version of me he silenced for years. Outside, the sky stretched wide and clear, brighter than it had been in months. The wind brushed my face, cool and unfamiliar, carrying a strange calm I didn't know how to name yet. My phone buzzed with unread messages from relatives, some furious, some cautious, some suddenly sympathetic now that the truth was unavoidable. I didn't open any of them. The silence felt earned. That night, I returned to my apartment, the same one that once echoed with despair. But now the silence didn't suffocate me. It felt controlled. Intentional. I sat by the window, city lights flickering below, and allowed myself to breathe without guilt for the first time. A final message came through from him, softer than I ever expected, almost unfamiliar. "I never thought you'd actually let me fall." I stared at the screen, heart unmoved, knowing that my empathy no longer belonged to him. Because the truth was heavy but clear. I didn't leave him with nothing. He left himself with exactly what he earned. And as the phone dimmed in my hand and the room grew quiet again, I realized something that felt disturbingly peaceful. I wasn't angry anymore. I was just free. And that silence, for the first time in my life, felt louder than any apology he could ever offer.